The Trump administration is committed to helping persecuted Christians and religious minorities in the Middle East. How serious is that commitment? Former Virginia Congressman Frank Wolf knows, and he'll tell us. And later, Christian movie producer and author of The Hollywood Commandments, DeVON FRANKLIN, will let us in on a few of his spiritual secrets for success. And finally, Christ's tomb in Jerusalem underwent a massive restoration last year. What if you could see it in all its glory without leaving the U.S.? The folks from National Geographic have the solution, and they're here with a preview. The World Over begins right now.
Now, from Washington, D.C., Raymond Arroyo.
A warm welcome to all of you joining us in the United States and the world over. Congressman Frank Wolf, DeVON FRANKLIN, and a look at a fantastic new attraction at the National Geographic Museum are all straight ahead. If you'd like to comment on tonight's show, send me a tweet. I'm at Raymond Arroyo. I'll be live tweeting throughout, or you can email us at worldover@EWTN.com, but I read the tweets. Here's the brief news from the world over this week. Republican leaders in Washington have all but abandoned the nominee for the U.S. Senate in Alabama. Conservative firebrand Roy Moore is refusing to drop out of next month's general election amid recently announced allegations of sexual misconduct that occurred some 40 years ago. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell and House Speaker Paul Ryan have both said Moore should step aside. The Republican National Committee and the National Republican Senatorial Committee have also severed ties with the former Alabama Chief Justice. Roy Moore said at a campaign stop on Tuesday, there is a spiritual battle going on in American politics. He claims to be the subject of a political witch hunt. Meanwhile, could it finally be the beginning of the end for Obamacare? Senate Republicans are moving forward with legislation that will scrap the Affordable Care Act requirement that Americans must get health insurance or pay a tax penalty. Finance Committee Chairman Senator Orrin Hatch confirmed that he was including the repeal in the markup of the GOP tax bill in order to, quote, help provide additional relief to low and middle-income families, end quote. The House Republican Study Committee swiftly endorsed the move. House Speaker Paul Ryan said he didn't want to complicate the vote on tax reform, so he didn't include it. He said by including it now, it could cost votes from moderate Republicans. We'll see. And gay rights supporters across Australia celebrated as a majority of Australians said they support gay marriage. The result of a 2-month mail ballot vote ensures that Parliament will consider a bill to legalize same-sex weddings before the end of the year. However, some government lawmakers have vowed to vote down gay marriage regardless of the survey's outcome. A spokesman for the Coalition for Marriage said that if lawmakers do pass gay marriage, they must ensure that freedom of speech and freedom of religion are protected. Back here in the U.S., the Supreme Court will hear a challenge to a California law that targets pro-life crisis pregnancy centers. The justices said Monday they will review the center's complaint that the new law, pushed by an abortion rights group, forces them to provide information about abortion and other services. Under the law, the pro-life pregnancy centers are required to notify pregnant mothers and post signage that abortions are available to them elsewhere and that they are available for free. The case will be heard by the High Court early next year. And a new report indicates that the Federal Bureau of Investigation could be probing Planned Parenthood. According to The Hill, the FBI has asked the Senate Judiciary Committee for documents regarding the alleged trafficking of body parts of aborted babies by Planned Parenthood and other abortion providers. The abortion giant came under fire in 2015 after investigative journalists from the Center for Medical Progress released a series of undercover videos that showed Planned Parenthood affiliates admitting to harvesting and distributing various body parts and fetal tissue. Planned Parenthood said that none of its affiliates has had any contact with the FBI. The Justice Department declined to comment. Under the law, abortion providers can only recover the cost related to supplying aborted babies for research. The Senate report concluded that Planned Parenthood instead profited by it, and in some cases, related costs weren't even calculated. On Monday, Vice President Mike Pence met with Vatican Secretary of State Cardinal Pietro Parolin. According to the White House, Vice President Pence and Cardinal Parolin discussed human trafficking, religious freedom in the Middle East, and fundamental values shared by the U.S. and the Holy See. Parolin told EWTN News that he also brought up the subject of immigration with the Vice President, asking for a, quote, compassionate approach to the issue of migration. The White House did not mention that in its press release. The Cardinal was in the U.S. to attend the United States Bishops' Fall Assembly in Baltimore. The American bishops are celebrating their centennial year as a conference. And at their conference, the U.S. bishops picked Archbishop Joseph Naumann of Kansas City to lead their committee on pro-life activities. Naumann edged out Chicago Cardinal Blaise Cupich by a very slim margin, 96 votes to 82. Now, this breaks the long-standing tradition of electing a cardinal to chair the pro-life committee. Archbishop Naumann said he intends to keep the focus of the committee on abortion and euthanasia. Cardinal Cupich, on the other hand, would have expanded the committee's focus to include capital punishment, health care, and poverty. Meanwhile, former president of the U.S. Bishops' Conference, Archbishop Joseph Kurtz, was elected chairman of the Committee on Religious Liberty. That committee was made permanent earlier this year. And Pope Francis is continuing to utilize his bully pulpit to wade into highly charged political and prudential issues. This past week, the Pope blamed, quote, short-sighted human activity for climate problems. He urged leaders in climate talks in Germany to take a global outlook as they negotiate ways to curb heat-trapping emissions. Francis said he shares their concerns about the rising sea levels and increasingly intense storms that threaten small islands. He decried in particular the state of the oceans, where overfishing and pollution are threatening fish stocks and sea life that are critical to Pacific livelihoods. And speaking a day earlier at a Vatican-hosted conference on nuclear disarmament, Francis said without equivocation, the threat of their use as well as their very possession is firmly to be condemned, end quote. This would include, he said, the possession of nuclear weapons as a deterrent effect, which creates a climate of instability and conflict and a mentality of fear. The Pope's comments went beyond his predecessors, who have consistently called for nuclear disarmament, but did not necessarily say that their possession was inherently immoral. Meanwhile, in church news, Cardinal Raymond Burke this week made a final plea to the Pope to clarify his teaching on Amoris Laetitia. Cardinal Burke's latest request came on the anniversary of when he and 3 other cardinals made public their dubia, or questions, concerning Pope Francis's teaching on communion for divorced and civilly remarried Catholics. Burke told the National Catholic Register's Edward Penton that confusion over Amoris Laetitia within the Church is continually worsening. He urged the pontiff to confirm his brothers in the faith with a clear expression of the teaching regarding Christian morality and sacramental practice. On these points, Pope Francis has remained silent, and a clarification does not seem to be forthcoming. We will continue to follow this story. When we return, Christians and religious minorities continue to face persecution in the Middle East. Will they get the help they need from the U.S. government? Human rights activist and former Virginia Congressman Frank Wolf will update us, and much more when The World Over continues. Stay right there.
Our fellow Christians and all who are persecuted in the Middle East should not have to rely on multinational institutions when America can help them directly. From this day forward, America will provide support directly to persecuted communities through USAID. We will no longer rely on the United Nations alone to assist persecuted Christians and minorities. in the wake of genocide and the atrocities of terrorist groups.
Welcome back to The World Over. That was Vice President Mike Pence speaking in October about the Trump administration's renewed determination to offer direct aid to persecuted Christians. As we reported at the time, however, some at USAID seem to be slow-walking this new policy following the Vice President's announcement. My next guest is a human rights activist and former Virginia Congressman who met with White House officials just this week, including the Vice President, here with an update on the administration's commitment to persecuted Christians and religious minorities in the Middle East. I'm joined by Distinguished Senior Fellow at 21wilberforce.org, Congressman Frank Wolf. Thanks for being back here.
Thank you.
Now, I wanted to start with this meeting. First of all, this policy that so many of us were enraged by. I had Nina Shea on weeks before the Vice President made this announcement because no one was noticing that we had this $1 billion plus aid set aside for these persecuted minorities, and the money wasn't getting to them. What happened? What was the galvanizing force that focused the administration's attention on this issue?
I think it was Vice President Pence's speech. And I think it's important to know, several years ago when Sister Diana, a Dominican nun who I think was on your program, was trying to come into the country, President Trump did an email and Twitter saying she ought to be coming in. And so I think he cares deeply. Vice President Pence does care deeply. Having served with him, he's a man of great faith. And once he gave that speech, everything fell into place. So I will tell you that Trump-Pence administration is totally committed to spending that money and helping Christians, Yazidis, and other religious minorities.
All right. Tell me about that meeting. I mean, the Vice President tweeted out the picture of you with Nikki Haley and the Vice President, some of his staff. You aren't usually, look, you've been around Washington a long time. These meetings don't normally impress Frank Wolf, we have to say up front. This seemed to be a different outcome for you.
It was, and I had commented at the meeting that I wish the Christians and the Yazidis who are in the Nineveh Plains area could have been at the meeting, could have seen the commitment. The Vice President was very strong, very firm, very well prepared. Ambassador Nikki Haley, the same, came back in. Then Administrator Mark Green, a good guy who I served with in Congress, and he was an ambassador in Africa, very, very strong. And lastly, the Deputy Secretary of State, Sullivan, very strong. They are totally committed. There wasn't anybody saying, well, you know, we can't do this, we can't do that. They're going to do it. So I think it was a great meeting. I wish everyone could have been there because I think you have to show the Christians and the Yazidis, because they've both been subject to genocide. And I think this is the fastest that I've ever seen an administration move. The genocide in Srebrenica, it took forever. The genocide in Rwanda, forever. We still haven't ever dealt with the Armenian genocide. And so they have defeated ISIS. They're now beginning to push this in, and I think you're going to see major things. So I had Vice President Pence and this administration not done what they've done, I think we would have seen the end of Christianity in the cradle of Christendom. And it's important. Abraham is from Iraq. Daniel is buried in Iraq. When we were there, we went to Nahum's tomb. He's buried in Iraq. Ezekiel's buried in Iraq. Jonah's tomb was blown up by ISIS.
You know, the Chaldean church is one of the oldest on the planet.
Oldest, and they speak Aramaic. So I think what the administration's done is very, very powerful.
Okay, tell me concretely, what does this mean? The President and the Vice President have expressed to you and to everyone, we will be giving direct aid to the persecuted church and persecuted individuals. The problem before is it was going through the UN and then it was being given to other groups. What concretely does this change? What did you hear at the meeting?
I think it changes everything, because what they're going to do is money that goes to the UN will be monitored carefully by Nikki Haley. It'll almost be conditioned. So money that goes through there will then be directed to help this Christian group, this Christian town, this Yazidi. The Yazidis on Mount Sinjar. Secondly, and Administrator Green has said he will have another pot of money that he will be giving directly to groups like Samaritan's Purse and groups affiliated with the Knights of Columbus. The Knights have done a great job, because the Knights were there, if you recall, when we were trying to get this called genocide. They pushed. So groups affiliated with them, Steve Reich, who you may have had on the show, they will be available to get this. And so those who have been subject to genocide. Genocide I mean, they're going to help them.
And it took years to get that classification out of the State Department.
It did take years, but fortunately, this administration, as ISIS is being defeated, you're finding Christians beginning to move back into the towns. When we were in Bartella and Karakush, you could see the vans coming in with furniture on the top. Their homes were just destroyed. The churches were destroyed.
Right.
I believe all my heart with what the speech that Vice President Pence gave, the support from President Trump, with the commitment that Ambassador Nikki Haley made, the commitment that Ambassador Mark Green and Minister Mark Green gave, and the Deputy Secretary, they were powerful. They were prepared. They said, we are going to do it. So I'm very encouraged. And I wish that somehow this could have gotten to the people, the people that are living in these tents. We visited some
that's terrible conditions.
Terrible conditions. If they could have heard that, but I believe what the administration is going to do is going to make a big difference.
Catholic Charities was initially a little cold to this policy when it was announced. Will they be part of this distribution of funds?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay. Let's move on and talk for a moment about what's happening in some of, and it's not only in the international religious freedom area, it's happening throughout the administration. Some of the second-tier secretaries and permanent leaders in some of these offices have not been appointed in the Trump administration. We have a story today. Trump State Department misses key religious freedom deadline, designating countries of particular concern. How concerned are you about this deadline being missed?
Well, I am, but I will tell you that had Ambassador, Governor, and former Senator Sam Brownback been confirmed and on, I don't believe they would have missed it. And I don't know what's happening, but Sam Brownback is as good of a man that you're going to ever have. I traveled with then Senator Brownback. We were the first two members of Congress to go to Darfur. He came back from Darfur and advocated and got the Bush administration to designate that as genocide. The guy cares deeply. He cares deeply about Coptic Christians. He's spoken out against anti-Semitism. No. Why the Senate has blocked him, I don't understand.
No, they're slow walking a lot of these confirmations.
But by slow walking Governor Brownback, here's what they're gonna do. One, Governor Brownback wanted to travel to places like Burma for the Rohingya. He wanted to travel to the Middle East. He wanted to go to Nigeria. Boko Haram is killing people. He can't go until he's confirmed. Secondly,
and he's been appointed ambassador at large for international religious freedom, but not confirmed.
And not confirmed. Secondly, if an office is unattended for months, people begin to leave. The best people don't come. By not confirming Governor Brownback, it is hurting the issues of the persecution of the Ahmadi Muslims in Pakistan, the Tibetans in China. I mean, so Governor Brownback will do a great job. So why the Senate would block him, I hope they will move quickly.
What do you say to those? And there are some critics I've been reading who say the Trump administration is too narrowly focused on this problem of Christian persecution to the exclusion of other groups.
Well, that's not accurate, because at the meeting yesterday, Vice President Pence and the others made it clear it was to help Christians and Yazidis and Turkmen and Chibok, all of the groups, all of the minorities who were persecuted, subject to genocide, will be helped. In fact, as the Yazidis have suffered, they're still, at this moment, 3,000 Yazidi girls are being held by ISIS as slaves. So, no, the administration has made it clear. I don't think that's a fair criticism of them, because they're saying Christians, Yazidi, and the other religious minorities, and they made that very, very clear.
We're so focused on the Middle East, and it is an area of major concern given what's happening to Christians there and other groups. What other countries bother you the most? You are so tuned into what's happening out there.
Well, go from one that you can deal with quickly, one that is Pakistan. We have a friend of mine, Shahbaz Bhatti. He was a Catholic. He was in the cabinet. He was gunned down because he was advocating for the Christians. There's a Christian woman, Asa Bibi, A-S-I-A Bibi. She's been in prison under a death sentence. Not sure, sentenced for 7 years for blasphemy, for taking a cup of a drink of water out of a cup. Nigeria, 900 churches have been burned down. Boko Haram has pledged allegiance to ISIS. We still have 100 girls, the Chibok girls, that have not been released. And China has Catholic bishops under house arrest,
an outrage.
Protestant pastors in jail, they're plundered to Tibet, they're persecuting the Uyghur Muslims. So China, Pakistan, the world. That's why we need Sam Brown back on
you do
the job.
need somebody to monitor this. I read a story today where the Chinese government is asking Christians to take the image of Jesus down in their churches and put up a picture of President Xi.
I heard that, but let me tell you, Christianity is going to overcome China. The church, the Catholic Church is growing, the evangelical church is growing. It's almost not that we want persecution to come here, but it's persecution is where the people are persecuted, and there's so many biblical references to the persecuted, and so the church in China, I believe, will far outlast President Xi. President Xi will be long gone and forgotten about, and the Christian church will be flourishing.
Congressman Frank Wolf, thank you so much for being here and for all you do. The Congressman is part of the 21st Century Wilberforce Initiative, which works on behalf of persecuted Christians and religious minority communities around the world. Visit them at 21wilberforce.org. When we return, you've heard of the 10 Commandments, but movie producer DeVON FRANKLIN is here to deliver the Hollywood Commandments and talk about his new animated Christmas film, The Star. So stay right there. The World Over continues in a moment.
Now, once again, Raymond Arroyo.
Welcome back to The World Over. With all the negative press coming out of Hollywood these days, my guest tonight has some good news. How's that for a change? He's a producer responsible for films like Heaven is for Real and the best-selling author of a new book, The Hollywood Commandments, a spiritual guide to secular success. DeVON FRANKLIN is here to tell us about the spiritual lessons he's learned while toiling in Hollywood. And we also discuss his new animated Christmas film, The Star, which opens this weekend. We also talk to several of the stars in The Star, so you get a double package here. Here's our exclusive interview with DeVON FRANKLIN. I want to start with the new book, The Hollywood Commandments. In it, you really make the argument that you can have secular success without losing your faith. Now, how do you do that in Hollywood, DeVON?
Oh, hey, Raymond, here's how you do it. And I get this question a lot, and I love talking about it. When you look at Jesus, when he did the Sermon on the Mount, he told the Israelites at that time, you're supposed to be salt and you're light. When you look at that idea, salt doesn't get transformed by what it's on. Whatever the salt is on transforms whatever it's on. So I said, okay, wow, as a person of faith, as a Christian, being salt and being light, that means I have to go into environments that may be dark. I have to go into places where there may not be flavor, and the environment doesn't transform me. I'm designed to transform the environment. And so understanding that, that's what made me want to go to Hollywood. I've been in Hollywood for 20 years, and I can tell you God has made a tremendous way in this business because my main desire has been His will. My main desire has been to make content that can uplift and inspire people. And when you are clear of purpose, and when you are clear of intention, and when God has already ordained the path, you can't be stopped. In whatever industry you want to go into, you can find success. And that's why I wrote The Hollywood Commandments, a spiritual guide to secular success, so that anyone in any industry could have the manual on how to do it.
Okay, we're going to get into some of these specific principles, but in the book you talk about that story from Daniel 1, where the Hebrew boys are sent into Babylon. They're made to eat a diet incompatible with their beliefs. What are we to learn from that episode?
Oh my goodness, it's the foundational text which I base so much of the book on. And what we're to learn is that God never condemns Babylon in that sense, because He's like, hey, I have my people there. So what I love about that story is that Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they learned the strategy of Babylon, yet they didn't allow the strategy of Babylon to compromise what they learned in the synagogue. As a matter of fact, they paired what they learned in the synagogue along with strategy from Babylon, and that's where what propelled their success. What is fascinating is God never takes them out of Babylon. Every time they honor him in Babylon, what does God do? He promotes them so they go higher and deeper in an environment so that God had a greater platform by which he could be glorified. And this is how I see us as believers being able to have success in secular environments, because when we're in those environments that may not already be predisposed to our belief system, and we honor God and we do the job required, we create a platform by which God can be glorified.
Now, you in the book, you have one of your principles, and just as you spoke, it came to mind, where you say your prayers are not enough. You have to do something more. What is that something more?
Yes. Yes, commandment number one is your prayers alone aren't enough. So what I'm not saying prayer doesn't work, because prayer does work.
Yeah.
Prayer is powerful and prayer is important. I do it every day, multiple times a day. But what I'm saying is that too often as believers, we pray and we don't do. Faith without works is dead. That means faith with works is alive. So I believe we have to pray and prepare. Anything I pray for, I get up and prepare for. Why? Because preparation is an act of expectation. I believe God is going to answer my prayers, so I have to prepare in order to receive the answered prayer when it arrives. This particular commandment has helped me through my entire 20-year career in Hollywood. I believe God was going to allow me to be a producer. I didn't know when, so every day I would get up and prepare myself to one day produce. And you know how long it took? 18 years.
Yeah.
I started Hollywood when I was 18 years old. I didn't get my production company until I was 36. 157,000 hours of preparation, 6,500 days of preparation. You will reap a harvest if you do not quit. So don't be weary in well-doing. That is one of the key texts that I talk about in this particular commandment, because we get weary in our prayer life. And I'm saying, no, pray and prepare. Pray and do.
In the book, you admit that your family didn't want you to go to Hollywood. They called it Sodom and Gomorrah. And playing the devil's advocate, you look at these headlines coming out, Weinstein,
Yes.
Dustin Hoffman, Kevin Spacey, I could go on. It appears that the rot that has been underneath of even some of the biggest names in the industry is revealing itself. How can you thrive as a person of faith in an environment like that? Doesn't the Bible instruct you to stay away from evildoers, stay away from the darkness?
Aha. Well, Jesus says, be in the world, but not of it. And you cannot transform what you do not engage. And so when you look at Hollywood, it is true that absolute power corrupts absolutely. However, that's not exclusive to Hollywood. You see that happening in all industry, where people are able to be in power, but that power goes unchecked. And so when you're seeing in the Hollywood headlines right now is really a result of that idea. When you look at Hollywood, what I can tell you, there are thousands upon thousands of people that never get to the headline, that are great people of character, integrity, have families. So with that adage of saying, you know, a few rotten apples spoil the bunch, it really comes into play here. What you're seeing in the headlines of those that are driving the headlines is not the real Hollywood. And I can tell you, the people that I deal with on a day-to-day basis, they want to do good in the world. They're as mortified as you are with what is being revealed. So I want to just be very, very clear. In any industry, when people are able to get to a level of power that has no checks and balance system, it's important to know that abuse of power is potentially going to happen. And Hollywood is no exception to that. And my hope and my prayer is that in this moment, go ahead.
Give me your thought. Is this transformative then? Do you see this moment of all these people coming out with these sexual abuse allegations, is this going to transform your industry, or will it revert back to business as usual once this passes?
You know what? I am optimistic that this is a transformative moment. You know, what the Bible says, what's done in the dark will come to light. And I think that we're seeing that play out right in front of our very eyes. And what I love is that one of the reasons why I wrote the Hollywood Commandments is to extract what I have learned of value from Hollywood to help anybody become successful in their life. And one of the commandments that I talk about in the book, which is directly related to what's happening right now, is you must master the walk of fame. Yeah. Whenever you are successful, there's going to come notoriety. We were created to give praise, not receive it. However, when we receive praise and we allow our ego to be fed, we begin to edge God out, and that creates a very destructive process. So I do believe that this is a transformative moment for Hollywood, and part of the transformation is to speak truth about what is happening and how anyone in any walk of life can navigate a road to success, but still keep their integrity and character intact.
You say we often mistake our mission for God's. And as you said earlier in this interview,
Yes.
your mission has been to do God's will. How do you figure that out?
Oh, man. Well, commandment number 5 is your gut is hiding God.
Right.
And what I believe is that God speaks in a whisper, not always a yell. And you'll hear the Holy Spirit tell you you have to do something. And how do you know it's God? Because it usually defies the facts of your life. You don't have the money to do it. You don't have the time to do it. You don't have the resources to do it. But what you feel in your spirit that you're supposed to do, it persists. I believe that this is God's will. But faith without works is dead. So you have to have the faith to move on it. Starting my company, I did a movie years ago, Heaven is for Real. The movie was very successful. I had a feeling in my gut that it was time to quit working for Sony and start my company, Franklin Entertainment. 2 days after the movie opened, I was in the chairman's office. And again, I felt it, but I didn't know. So I had to put some faith behind the feeling. And I was in the chairman's office of Sony Pictures and I quit. I said, I have to leave the company. It's time for me to start my company. And I want you to fund my new company, Franklin Entertainment. And she kind of looked at me and she looked a little bewildered. But after a moment, she said yes. So as I heard God speak to my gut, I used faith, and then what I got was confirmation that what I felt was actually correct. That is the process I instruct the reader or anyone that asks me that question on how to figure out what God's will is, and then put yourself in a process in order to achieve it.
Well, you move, you go. Mother Angelica had a line, she used to say, God doesn't move before you do. You have to take that walk of faith, and that's scary. That's why God's will is sometimes scary. But you got to move before He does.
That's right. Absolutely. And that's why, Paul teaches us the Lord did not give us a spirit of fear, but of power, love, and a sound mind. So it's so important to make our fears our to-do list and to face them head on.
Tell us a moment about this notion, and you hazard it in the book, that you have to carry the crown before you wear one. Explain that concept and the notion of transitions. What should one do when they feel they're in the middle of one of those traumatic or non-traumatic transitions, whether it be in their professional life or family life?
Yes, commandment number 3 is you have to carry a crown before you wear one. And what I mean by that is so many people want the crown and the throne. They want the authority in their life, but they don't want to go through the process. The process is service. King David was anointed the king in 1 Samuel chapter 16, but he did not go and become the king immediately. Before he could be the king, he had to serve a king first. So this commandment is all about the power of service. Service never goes out of style. I believe you can serve your way to the top. So that's what that commandment is about. When it comes to transitions, what is so important, and this is sometimes when we miss a transition or we might disrupt a transition, we have to know that we have to go based upon what God has called us to do. There are some friends that may not be qualified for our future. They may have had access to our past, but they're not qualified for our future. Too often in a transitional moment, we're looking around us instead of looking at God and following what He has called us to do. Every time I've had a transition in my life, it has been a focal point of faith. There has never been a transition that I've had in my career and my life that did not require a major step of faith. And as we talked about earlier, it's scary, yet I can tell you on the other side of it is the peace that you're striving for. Because I believe real success is peace. Not money, not fame, not position, peace. And I do believe when you transition, you can get that peace, but you got to have faith.
Yeah, I want to share with people something. There's a prayer that you offer in the book during a transition, and you say, Lord, show me the way. Lord, please don't let me worship this. Lord, please don't let me read my own headlines. Lord, please don't let me sell the essence of who I am for a brief taste of success. Why do so many people ignore the pleas of that prayer, do you think?
Oh, because success is seductive. Success is tantalizing, and our desires are so strong that the enemy can corrupt what God meant for good. And if we aren't mindful of that, a good desire that God may have planted can then be corrupted and used against Him because we then follow what we want to do at the expense of figuring out what God wants us to do. I believe that this life and the power of it comes from the tension of God. I think this is what you want me to do, but let me go back and check, is this what you want me to do? And I take a step step of faith, and I check, and I take a step of faith, and I check, and I need God every step of the way. So I think so many times we miss it because we think, oh, I got it. It's like taking the training wheels off. Oh, I don't need God anymore. Oh, I got it. And the next thing you know, what we thought was leading to our destiny took us down a one-way street, and now we're in danger. I do believe that with every success, we have to keep God in it. And that's what that prayer is all about.
Yeah. I want to segue for a moment to your latest film coming out this weekend, The Star. Tell me about it. I know it centers around an animal, a donkey named Bo, at a particular moment in history. Tell us about it.
Yes, The Star is the story of the Nativity, but from the animal's point of view. So you know the story of the Nativity, but you've never seen it from this point of view. And Bo the donkey is the lead character, and he's the donkey that carries Mary and Joseph to the manger in Bethlehem. And he gets help from all of his animal friends, you know, Ruth the sheep and Dave the dove. And we have an incredible cast that have come together to help bring this story to life. Everyone from Stephen Yun to Gina Rodriguez to Zachary Levi to Keegan-Michael Key to Kristen Chenoweth, Kelly Clarkson, Oprah, Tyler Perry, Tracy Morgan, Mariah Carey, Fifth Harmony. We have an all-star cast that have come together to tell the real reason for the season. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to do The Star. I wanted to put the real reason back in the season. Christmas is all about the birth of Jesus. And let me tell you, when you see the birth of Jesus in this movie, it brings you to tears. And our incredible director, Tim Reckert, just did an awesome job of preserving all of the scriptural moments to make sure that it aligns with history and with the Bible.
DeVON, I want to talk more about this in a moment, but first, this is some interviews we conducted with some of the stars of The Star. Watch.
I play Edith the cow in The Star, and although at first I wondered why, when the writers looked at this cow, they thought, oh, Patricia Heaton, but I tried not to be offended, and in fact was quite impressed with Edith's role and her character. She's a little bit like me. She's kind of over it. She's tired. She hasn't gotten any sleep. I totally relate to all that as a mom of 4 who works a lot. And I just loved her sort of sardonic humor. It's really funny to be that character who doesn't believe this crazy stuff anymore. Almost as, I wouldn't say Edith is hopeless, but she's kind of seen it all. She knows what life is about. She knows you're going to be disappointed. She sees the youthful exuberance, and she was there once in her life, but now she's done. And so to be able to be a witness to this miracle, that's the fun part of playing that kind of character.
Coming to this story from a Catholic perspective meant that I really wanted to be faithful to the beats of the story that are given to us in the Gospels. And what was great about doing it from the animal's perspective is that we can do both. We can be faithful to the stuff that's given in the Gospel and also be creative in between the lines, so to speak, because what we're doing is we're pointing the spotlight on the characters we don't hear about in the Gospels. The Bible doesn't tell us what the camels are thinking or what the donkey is thinking, and that means that there's room for us to have some fun and be creative. The movie definitely focuses on the perspective of the animals, but we also put a big emphasis on Mary because the story of Bo, the main character, is also a story of his friendship with Mary. And in fact, down the road, we even see that Bo has learned to pray from his friendship with Mary. And that is something that I think resonates with a lot of people of faith, because Mary is not only a character from the Gospels, but is someone that we can have a relationship with now as our Blessed Mother. To get there, I think it really had to come from somewhere personal. So for me personally, as a Catholic, I really relish the opportunity to dig deep into who Mary and Joseph are. We aren't given like a paragraph of character description in the Bible as far as who they are as people, but my task as a filmmaker was literally to put words in their mouth because we were writing this script and we need to give them dialogue. And so I had to feel that where we were coming from with these characters had a biblical basis. What I find admirable in Mary's story is that when she hears the Annunciation, she's invited to be the mother of the Son of God. She doesn't ask, is there like a 20-year warranty on this? Like what happens down the road? She just says yes. And to me, that implies a character who just embraces the future and trusts in God, trusts that the future will be bright. And what's also great about that is it gives Mary a little bit of room to grow, because as the story moves along in The Star, Mary starts to realize that maybe there might actually be sorrow along this path that God has invited her to do. And that's a challenge to her personally, because it's not going to be as easy as she maybe thought it was at the beginning.
I think that Mary is a reflection of strength, the strength of every woman, the compassion, the empathy, the kindness, the humility, and she touches everyone that she comes across in this film because of her empathy and her ability to understand somebody's perspective and be able to care for them. She takes on others' emotions. And what's beautiful about her telling Joseph about her pregnancy is that it's done so delicately, and it's done in such faith that there's no question of silliness.
I've actually thought about it often, the moment where Joseph is hearing about that he's about to have a child that's not his, and what that must have been like, for Joseph to be processing that. Clearly, this is a woman that he loves and that he trusts. In fact, this is some kind of celestial happening, and angels are talking to us, and this is not at all what I was intending my life to look like or be, and I don't feel able to handle this. How can I raise the Son of God? I'm Joseph, I'm a carpenter, this is way above my pay grade. That's insanity. So, but there's also some comedy, I think, that you kind of have to play a little bit in that. Otherwise, it's just way too much to handle.
DeVON, tell me before I let you go, what was the impetus for wanting to tell this story this way? Was the project brought to you? Is this something you wanted to do and started the ball rolling? Where did the first movement come here?
Yeah, I have committed my, career and life to make uplifting content and content that can be inspirational and that can continue to build, in the faith space. Mm-hmm. And one of the areas that I noticed was just untapped and underserved was animation. Yeah. There hasn't been a faith-based animated movie from a major studio since The Prince of Egypt, almost 20 years ago. So I felt like that was an opportunity, and it just so happened that starting that opportunity with The Star just felt like the right fit. Mm-hmm. I mean, what better place to start than with the birth of Jesus and to show it from the animal's point of view. And this is the first movie from a major Hollywood studio to be a faith-based film told in CGI animation, the first ever of its kind. Yeah. So I thought that was a great opportunity, and also the faith-based audience wants more family content. I can't tell you how many people come up to me and say, I want more movies I can take my children to and my grandmother to and my family to, and I do believe The Star is that movie. You can take everyone to this film. You don't have to cover eyes, you don't have to cover ears. It is a movie that will warm your heart. It will educate the next generation on the power of the birth of Christ, and it will inspire you to remember the real reason for the season. And I'm hoping and praying that The Star becomes the holiday event this year at the box office.
This holiday season, witness the story of the first Christmas through a whole new set of eyes.
It's the wise men.
Hide quickly.
The other way.
The other left.
From the studio that brought you Miracles from Heaven and Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs, meet the unlikely heroes behind the greatest story ever told.
Herod is up to something.
Marion needs help. We need to save her. You're in danger. You need to listen to what I'm about to say extremely carefully.
Do you want a belly rub?
Bo.
If you want to get to my friends, you're going to have to get past me first.
Dave.
I'm going to go find someone to poop on. No, too big, too big.
Ruth.
Almost down. One more chasm. Uh-oh. Well, didn't exactly stick the landing, but that was good.
And Deborah, Cyrus, and Felix.
The new king's in danger.
Run for your life!
Get out of the way!
Here's a little well-placed distraction.
The Star.
DeVon's new Christmas movie, The Star, starring Patricia Heaton, Tyler Perry, Christopher Plummer, and many others, opens in theaters everywhere on Friday, November 17th. The Hollywood Commandments, a spiritual guide to secular success by DeVON FRANKLIN, is available at bookstores everywhere and online. When we return, they're bringing the tomb of Christ to the United States, practically. The curator and engineer of a brand new attraction at the National Geographic Museum here in D.C. will tell us all about it. It is jaw-dropping. Don't miss this. The World Over continues right after this.
Once again, Raymond Arroyo.
Welcome back to The World Over. My next guests were given what would seem a nearly impossible task, transforming the story of the renovation of Christ's tomb in Jerusalem into a life-size, three-dimensional experience right here in Washington, D.C. And the results are nothing short of miraculous. I'm now joined on set by two of the folks responsible for this amazing interactive experience at the National Geographic Museum. Archaeologist-in-residence Dr. Fred HIEBERT and engineer and National Geographic Fellow Corey JASKOLSKI. Gentlemen, thank you both for being here. Very interested, because you were there through a lot of this process, Fred. First of all, tell me, how did this come to be? The restoration, getting these various communities, and people don't understand because they haven't been there, the Greeks, the Catholics, the Protestants, to get everybody who have ownership over this site to agree on anything takes a millennium. What happened? How was this restoration agreed to?
This restoration was actually agreed to in 1959 by the Armenian, Greek Orthodox, and Franciscan orders that maintain the church. However, it took till 2016 to actually come up with a group that could fulfill the two most important parts that the church demanded in terms of doing restoration. One is that the church not be closed from Easter, during Easter, which meant that they had something like 9 months to carry out the entire renovation. And the second sort of impossible task that these restorers had to deliver was that they wouldn't close the shrine during the time period that it's being restored. Imagine that.
Now, you're an archaeologist. You must have been overwhelmed being a part of this whole thing, being witness to it and a part of it.
It was very different for me as an archaeologist. I mean, I am the archaeologist-in-residence at the National Geographic Society, so it's not that unusual for me to be spending the spring in Tutankhamun's tomb, or the fall at the Mycenaean tombs in Greece. And for me, it's natural to kind of commune with the past that way. The Church of the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem is like that. It's historic, it's important, but it's very different because it's a living monument as well. Completely different experience.
Yeah. Now, in 1009, this church was demolished and then rebuilt. And it's been touched up and added to, and the accretions of time really surround the tomb of Christ. Talk to me a little bit, Corey, about the engineering and the technical difficulty of moving around in that type of space. And we should tell people the edicule is what this restoration focused on. That's the little building, the shrine that surrounds the tomb of Christ, or what's left of it. Tell me the engineering challenges that presented.
You bet. Yeah, well, some of the biggest challenges of working in this space is really just the complexity of it. So when we're doing this laser scanning, we're basically taking billions of 3D measurements in a space. And doing that in a fairly rectangular room is pretty easy, but doing that in something as complex geometrically as the tomb and the chapel of the angel with all the hanging lamps and all the carvings on the walls, that was a really incredibly difficult thing to do with all those surfaces and details.
And you used certain technologies. There was this LIDAR. Tell me about this LIDAR. Is that the 3D?
LIDAR, yeah. And it's a laser scanner, and what it basically is a laser beam that shoots out at the wall and then comes back to the sensor. And by measuring how long that takes, we can calculate the exact distance down to a fraction of a millimeter.
I see.
But the really complicated part is this laser beam spins around and takes 20,000 of those measurements per second.
Wow.
So you got to imagine, you know, we're in this ancient, beautiful building, and we've got this green laser beam just striping
hitting
around
every surface
on the inside,
in the place.
hitting all of the surfaces.
But that allowed you to map out all of the spatial distances, and then you laid photographs on top of that.
Right.
Which people can experience in person, and my producer went and said it's unbelievable. I mean, you feel like you're there, in that you're walking through and can navigate and decide what to see, not only in the edicule, but throughout the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, which is kind of cool. Fred, I want to talk about that moment when they lifted, and we'll put some images up to help you understand this, when they pulled the marble casing that surrounds this tomb. You were there. You thought what?
Well, let me back up and give it a little bit of context that in this unbelievable agreement that they had to conserve this while the shrine is open, a group of architectural conservators from the National Technical University of Athens came up with this brilliant idea, literally it was brilliant, to inject liquid mortar into the building while it's standing to solidify it. And we thought that was great. Everything was going along great. Projects began in May, but by about June or July, someone had sort of raised their hand and said, well, how do we know that the liquid mortar won't go down onto the holy bed itself?
And that's the actual slab where Christ's body, tradition tells us, laid.
What it is, it's Christ was buried in a cave for 3 days temporarily.
Right.
That cave was discovered by the emissary of the Roman Empire, Constantine, who found a cave, a 1st century AD cave, and to expose it, Constantine ordered the cave demolished. They just lopped off the top of it.
Well, all the surrounding.
All the surroundings. So you could see the bed and maybe little stubs of the walls. And so that bed is what has not been seen because it had then been covered with marble slabs to protect it since who knows when.
Yeah. And when you pulled that out, you found what?
Wow. We found a lot of dust.
Oh, how bad. Well, there was also that Crusader. He had half of that Crusader marble.
That's right. There was a substructure. There was a lower marble that probably came from a time when the church had been renovated earlier. And the date of the upper marble is something like the 16th century AD. So you can just imagine what that lower marble would have dated to. And then underneath that, you could actually see the very bed, the very rock-cut bed of the tomb.
Now, I have been there, and years ago, there was a little icon on the wall, and when you opened it, you could see the stone wall inside. That, I was told, that and the bed are all that remain of the structure because it was destroyed in, what, 1009. Is that what you found when you pulled off the casing? That was all that is really
Believe it or
original?
not, no.
Really?
No, it's not. Actually, another one of these high-tech toys that I, as an archaeologist, don't know about, but the architectural conservators know about, Corey knows about, it's handheld ground-penetrating radar that's pointed sideways, and you can actually use the ground-penetrating radar to tell you the structural aspect of the building. You can see if this wall is thick the whole way through, if it's actually a series of layers. It's like an onion. And to the surprise of everybody, on either side of the holy bed, there was original cave wall preserved.
How high up?
About 6 feet tall.
Wow. So a lot of it is still standing.
It's a miracle.
Huh. Tell me what you discovered, Corey, because you used these lasers, you recorded all of this over several days. Your thoughts on the structural soundness of the edicule itself, that is the shrine surrounding what's left of the tomb. I read in some reports, some of the conservationists say it's really not up to snuff. The whole thing could collapse in addition to the dome of the church above it.
Wow. Yeah, you know, from the perspective of scanning it during the restoration while the supports were still up and then scanning it afterwards, you know, the work that's been done, when you get a look at it now, you really do get the sense that it is done very well and that it's, you know, built incredibly well at this point. So, you know, the terrifying part for me as an engineer was right before they took the steel supports down. You know, it's been holding it up. It was since the 1940s.
Right, all around it. You saw those steel supports.
And so, you know, to do the renovation and then take the cage off of it for the first time in you know, 80 years or so, it was pretty tense.
But it's still standing.
Still standing.
Still standing. There is the added threat, though, that the building now is solidified. It's structurally safe. As the director of the project says, it has a 2,000-year guarantee. However, what everybody noticed as they were working on this project is that the foundations were not touched during the conservation, and the substructure underneath it is badly in need of conservation. In other words, it could be a little bit like the Titanic, and it could just sort of tip over. So it needs more attention.
Wow. Now, when was it decided that this restoration project would become a standing exhibit at National Geographic?
Yeah, I think it happened sort of late in the game. I mean, I think we always wanted to make an exhibit out of it, but we were never sure of like what aspect of it. How when most museum exhibits are a series of artifacts from the location, or pictures, and from this we of course had some pictures and videos, but it wasn't artifacts that we were putting into a museum exhibit. So once we had these 3D scans from during the renovation and after it, I think it became pretty clear that we could make this compelling interactive exhibit.
Now, Fred, tell me, as an archaeologist, my children fondly remember that Indiana Jones project that you and Lucasfilm worked on years ago. That it made archaeology really cool because it took the fake artifacts from Indiana Jones and melded them with these Mayan bowls, and I remember necklaces and all sorts of things that were there. What was the thinking behind this exhibit and making it a 3D virtual experience, and what will people expect when they go?
What we love to do at National Geographic headquarters is make the viewer, whether it's someone who's watching the television or reading the magazine or walking into an exhibit, feel like they're walking into the pages of National Geographic. We wanted to really come up with an out-of-the-box experience. Having been there, I was in Jerusalem on and off about 10 times over the course of 2016 and 2017, and I was humbled by the experience, thinking that I'm one of just a few hundred people who have a chance to experience the church like this. How could I bring that experience to the greater public? What I think Corey has done is absolutely amazing. It feels like I'm going back to Jerusalem. Wow. It's hugely successful.
And when you go into the Edicule, when you walk in through the Chapel of the Angels and into the tomb area, it is when the tomb is exposed without the marble covering?
No, the scanning that we did was while the marble covering is in place. So it looks right now in the exhibit exactly as it looks today if you go visit it.
Okay.
So although it was a historic moment to have the cover removed, what we really wanted in the experience is to have it look as it's looked for the last 1,000 years.
And you have photographs and video of all of that.
Of course, yes.
So people can see that as well and experience it. And you can walk about the entire church.
Pretty much.
I'm told, in the virtual experience.
That's right. So that's one of the benefits of this virtual experience is the Church of the Holy Sepulchre is too big to recreate one-to-one inside of our museum, but we can virtually take you through the entire church, through the courtyard, past the anointing stone. You can look up at Golgotha. You can go to the Edicule and
that's amazing. People don't realize how close the tomb from the crucifixion site, how close it is. It's all under the same roof in that church.
It's a couple hundred feet away.
And it's an amazing, I mean, historically, they seem to think this is probably the most archaeologically sound site of all the religious sites in Jerusalem, the Christian sites anyway.
It certainly is one of the epicenters of Christianity. I mean, the fact that it has been razed and Jerusalem's been invaded and there have been fires and earthquakes, every time comes back to the actual importance of the location of the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. It really does become X marks the spot.
Yeah.
And there is even a place in the church, right close to the Edicule, which says, this is the center of the world.
Wow.
Wow is right.
What did you, I read a report where you said when you walked in and they had pulled the marble covering off, that your knees were shaking when you walked in.
It sure was. It was a very emotional experience. It was late at night. We had closed the church doors for the first time in hundreds and hundreds of years. So it was very special to be inside with about 50 monks, about 25 architectural restorers, and a small gaggle of us from National Geographic. And to hear the sound of that marble being moved off of that, I will never forget that. And then being able to go and look in. We have an interview with one of the monks who feels, he explains that he was changed by looking in, and the reporter says, well, what did you see? And he said, rock, the holy rock. That's the point.
That's it. That's the whole point. That's
the whole point.
Corey, Fred, thank you so much for being here. The Tomb of Christ, the Church of the Holy Sepulchre experience at the National Geographic Museum here in D.C. is certainly worth your time. It will be on exhibit from now through August 15th, 2018, so you have plenty of time to see it. Visit nationalgeographic.org/DC for more details. Thanks so much. Fascinating thing that you've captured and a moment in history that you'll allow millions of people to have access to. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you.
That is all the time we have for now. Now, for you Christmas shoppers, be sure to check out the Will Wilder books for your young adventurers out there. Books 1 and 2 are available. It's the first Christmas you can get both of them. EWTN's religious catalog has signed editions. I inscribed a limited number. You can get them at EWTNRC.com. Again, they're in limited numbers, or you can get them on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, but they don't have the signed editions. Until next time, the show continues on Facebook and Twitter. Like me on Facebook. You can follow me on Twitter. The links are at RaymondArroyo.com. And be sure to join us next week, the Thanksgiving show. Until then, we'll be scouting the world over for all that is seen and unseen. On behalf of the staff and crew of EWTN News, thanks for watching. I'm Raymond Arroyo from Washington, D.C. Bye now.